You've probably heard a lot on social media about fearful avoidance. But what exactly is a fearful avoidant anyway, and how do they differ from a dismissive avoidant? I'm going to give an overview of what a fearful avoidant is in a nutshell. Obviously, there's way more to it than I can explain in a single video, but I'm going to give a pretty good overview. First, let's take a step back. Let's view attachment as if it's a football field. At one goal, you have dismissive avoidance. They are the pure avoidant. On the other goal, on the other side of the field, you have anxious preoccupied. Those are the anxious attachers. Now, at midfield, you have securely attached people. Now, since we know dismissive avoidants are the pure avoidant, what is the fearful avoidant? They actually have both an anxious preoccupied as well as a dismissive avoidant attachment. They actually have both insecure attachment styles. This is also known as disorganized attachment. And how they show up in a relationship can vary a lot, and it can vary depending on the circumstance, the individual fearful avoidant, as well as their partner. And they can actually alternate between these two attachment styles, even within the same relationship. Now, they share similarities yet differences in childhood experiences between a fearful avoidant and a dismissive avoidant. Now, the dismissive avoidant, they generally experience consistent childhood emotional neglect. They often grew up in households where parents didn't say, "I love you," households where you didn't talk about feelings. And when they tried to express their feelings were routinely dismissed, rejected. If you're going to be sad, go be sad in your room. They often came from stable households with two parents that are still together, parents that actually might love the child, but really fall short of showing it. Dismissive avoidants also commonly experience a parent or both that are very controlling yet not nurturing, smothering. The end result is a person that does not feel comfortable expressing emotions. They were never shown how to as a child, and they don't feel comfortable being vulnerable either. They weren't shown the love and nurturing in the way that they needed, so this causes them to have a feeling like they are defective, like there's something wrong with them, that they're not lovable. So they fear getting too close to somebody because the subconscious fear in the dismissive avoidant is, if I let someone behind that wall, the wall I have around my heart, this person's going to figure out that I'm defective. They're going to figure out I'm not lovable. They're going to reject and they're going to abandon me. In addition to that, they also fear expressing themselves. They fear communication because they associate it with rejection and emotional abandonment. They fear commitment for the same reason, because when you commit to somebody, it's implied that you have to be vulnerable with them, and vulnerability means rejection and abandonment. Now, dismissive avoidants also fear losing their independence, and this generally is because they had a controlling parent or two. So they associate emotional closeness with not only rejection and abandonment, but with losing your independence as well. So that is the dismissive avoidant in a nutshell. Fearful avoidants also experience that consistent childhood emotional neglect. But in addition to that neglect, they often experienced a household that featured volatility, chaos, sometimes even abuse, physical or emotional, sometimes trauma. So what happens is they developed that anxious attachment as well, in addition to that avoidant attachment. Early in a relationship, the fearful avoidant is likely to be in their anxious attachment. They are often clingy, needing reassurance. They can be very quick to put a label on the relationship, to put a title on it, to earn that love and to earn that affection and to latch on. It's as the relationship progresses that the dismissive avoidance side gets triggered and starts to come out. Fearful avoidants, they carry a deep wound of distrust. This is a profound wound that they have. They relied on their parents or caretakers to be there for them, to support them, to nurture them, and they were betrayed by the people that they relied on as a child. So they have the subconscious wound, this feeling that betrayal is always around the corner, is imminent. And they become hyper vigilant in relationships, looking for any inconsistency that they can find in their partner, because this inconsistency proves to them that they're going to get betrayed, they're going to get cheated on, they're going to get hurt. And when they find these inconsistencies, it validates their subconscious, because the human mind likes to be validated. It likes to be proven right, even if it's about something you don't want to be right about. So after the honeymoon phase, when they're really in their anxious attachment, when they're really all in, they start to become hypervigilant and they start finding these inconsistencies. Sometimes they do find legitimate inconsistencies, but sometimes they take small things and blow them up, or they even manufacture inconsistencies to prove their fears right. Also, fearful avoidance, just like a dismissive avoidant, they fear communication, because as a child, if they communicated their needs and feelings, they were rejected. So if their partner is doing something that they don't like, if their partner is not meeting their needs or expectations or wants in any particular way, they often don't communicate it. They just bottle it up. They don't say anything. They just stuff it. They're afraid of rejection. They're afraid of a conflict. But the problem is, over time, these built up unresolved needs, unmet wants, these things that are bothering them that are not being addressed, it builds up into resentment. So they're starting to resent their partner and being hypervigilant at the same time. Now, when this gets to its breaking point, this is when the full dismissive avoidant comes out of the fearful avoidant. They can completely deactivate, shut down, suppress their emotions, detach from them, bury their feelings for their partner, and they won't even allow themselves to access those feelings. This is how they learn to keep themselves safe. And this can result in a blindsiding, abrupt discard. Well, it's not blindsiding to the fearful avoidant, because they've been building up this resentment all this time, and they've been noticing things they don't like. But it's blindsiding to the person on the receiving end, because until this point, everything seemed great, everything seemed fine. And then it's like the rug just completely pulled from underneath this person's feet. It is earth-shattering. Now, on the flip side, fearful avoidants are also notorious for doing a slow fade pull away. Because of their hypervigilance, they're perceiving that rejection, abandonment, betrayal is imminent, so they start to slowly distance themselves from their partner. And they're fighting this internal battle of fear, but yet desire to maintain the relationship and connection. And then eventually they can just end the relationship or slow fade into complete oblivion. After the relationship is over, a fearful avoidant is more likely to breadcrumb the other person, because especially if no contact is used, that anxious side starts to get triggered and they want that reassurance. They want that validation to know that they're still wanted. Yes, dismissive avoidants can breadcrumb too. They do it quite a bit, but fearful avoidants do it even more. And fearful avoidants are also more likely to give the relationship another try. It's not uncommon for a discard, breakup, and getting back together 10, 12, 15 times with the same fearful avoidant. If they're not working on themselves, they are still going to have those fears and triggers, and every time they separate, the anxious side takes over, then they get back in, then the avoidance side, and back and forth and back and forth. Fearful avoidants have an extreme push-pull dynamic within relationships. Now, that said, fearful avoidants are also much more likely to show up as an anxious attacher if they are in a relationship with somebody who is emotionally unavailable. So if they get into a relationship with, let's say, someone who's a narcissist, they're likely to pretty much be in anxious mode all the time with this person, constantly trying to win and earn the love and validation from this person in the same way that a pure anxious attacher would. Fearful avoidants often grew up in toxic households, and the toxic dynamic between them and a narcissist is unfortunately quite familiar, and there's a comfort in familiarity. When they get into a relationship with somebody who is consistent, loving, and emotionally unavailable, it feels foreign to the fearful avoidant. They didn't grow up with that. They hadn't experienced it. And they're constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop. And they have this feeling like, well, this person can't really love me this much. They must be trying to manipulate me. The fearful avoidant is much more likely to show up in an avoidant way with a partner that is emotionally available. Now, one more thing. Fearful avoidants are not all the same. Some are much more dominant on their anxious side, and some are much more dominant on the avoidant side. The ones that are dominant on their anxious side tend to do better and last in long-term relationships, sometimes for the long haul. The ones that are more avoidant, well, unfortunately, those are typically the ones that run for the hills, especially in a good relationship.